Hi, I'm Barry from Podhome, and I'd like to talk to you about value for value. So, let's say that you have a podcast host, which is Podhome, your home for intelligent podcast tools, and we create an RSS feed for you, which is an XML file that contains all of the information for your show and your episodes. Now, with Podhome, and I'll show you this later, you can create what's called a value block. So information about how you can receive value. In this case, when we talk about value, we're talking about Bitcoin Lightning. So small pieces of Bitcoin that listeners can send to you. So in Podhome, you can configure this by configuring value recipients, which are people or things that can receive Bitcoin Lightning, and by configuring remote items, which are other XML feeds, other RSS feeds, or items within that feed, like for instance a track from an artist, that then also contains value information. Now, Podhome creates this RSS feed, this XML information, and modern player apps like Fountain or Podcast Guru know what this information is and can use it. So that you, as a listener, for instance, can then stream small pieces of Bitcoin called sats or satoshis to the modern podcast app and then to the recipient that you've configured within the RSS feed. And the fun thing here is that you can also send value to other people. So for instance, if you play a song within your podcast, you can then configure it, then when that song is played, all of the value goes directly to that artist. And then somebody, a listener, can use this modern podcast app like Fountain to send a boost to an artist. And a boost is an amount of sats with a comment attached to it. And that lets the artist know, hey, I like your song, here is a little bit of money. That's a pretty cool idea, isn't it? So let's sum this up. So this value for value, where you send small pieces of Bitcoin to artists and to yourself and to other things through modern podcast apps, that's a form of monetization, a form of monetizing your podcast. But in all honesty, you're probably not going to get rich from it because most podcasters won't actually make a lot of money. And that's fine. But most importantly, when you receive sats or boosts with comments, you'll have direct interactions with your listeners. You can see that people are actually listening to your show and that they derive value from it. And perhaps you can communicate with them through the comments, which is very cool. Now, how do we use this in Podhome? Here we are in Podhome in my Developer Weekly show. You can have multiple shows. In fact, you can have unlimited amount of shows. And I can configure value for value within the show settings. So here in show settings, I go to monetization and value for value. And here I can enable value for value, which I've already done. Now you can configure some generic settings, like which type of network you use, which is Lightning in this case, and KeySend, because that's what all the modern podcast apps use. And then you can configure the recipients for your show. So in this case, I have two recipients, the podcastindex.com and Podhome at GetAlby, which is my Lightning address at getalby.com. And so these settings apply to all of the episodes within my show unless I override them on a show level. Now, we try to make this very easy for you because if you want to add a new recipient, you simply type in the Lightning address that you know, for instance, something like this, or at fountain.fm. And we look that up for you and fill in all of the details like this. And of course, you can also enter all of the details manually. Now, I won't go into what all of these fields specifically mean. You can look that up in the documentation, and also the tooltips will guide you through that. Now, let's go to a specific episode and see what we can do there. So here in episode settings, there's also a value for value tab, and I can choose to enable value for this episode. When I do, I override the value settings for the show. So these settings apply to this specific episode. And now here I can very simply copy the show recipients that you just saw just to make it easy, and then change them perhaps if I need to for this specific episode. And also, I can use time splits or value time splits. Now, what is this? Well, with time splits, I can do the following. Here, for instance, at 29 seconds in the episode, I play a song by Ainsley Costello, Rescued, which is a great song, and that lasts for 4 minutes. Now, during this time, I want all of the value that gets streamed to my episode or boosted to my episode to go to Ainsley. And I do this by filling in the feed ID and the item GUID. And by doing that, the player app, like Fountain, will resolve all of that and will look up the value information from that feed and will use that to send all of those Satoshis to Ainsley, which is great. So how do you create such a time split? Because this does look complicated, but it really isn't. Well, you just add a time split, you fill in a start time, and then you can add a recipient or a new remote item. And a remote item is another feed, another RSS feed, or an item within that feed, so an episode, which can be a music track. So let's say I want to only search in music podcasts only. That means that I filter on the medium tag with the value music. And I look for, let's say, Joe Martin. Now, he has several albums, like this one, for instance. Let's take a look. When I click on this, I can see all of the tracks within his album. And these are all great tracks. I can preview them, I can also download them, and I can just add this to my time split. And when I do, the duration is automatically filled, and all of these details like feed GUID, feed URL, and item GUID are also filled in automatically. And then I can simply save this. Now, the fun thing is that I can easily add time splits as chapters if I want to. So I could click here and I could insert these time splits, so the start times with their items, to the chapters. I can merge them with my existing chapters, or I can override existing chapters. Let's just do that and see what happens. All right, let's take a look at the chapters here, in the chapters tab. And here we go, we have a couple. We have Love Letter by Ainsley Costello, and that starts at this time. And we filled in the chapter artwork. And we can see the other ones here as well, including this one that we just added by Joe Martin. And the cool thing is that when my episode hits 23 minutes and this song plays, I need to do that myself manually in my episode to play this song. But then the album art also changes. So in modern podcast apps, like Fountain, for instance, I would then see this, which is just delightful, isn't it? And one last thing for these time splits is that you can also download all of the remote items files, so all of the MP3 files, in this case, all files from songs, as a zip file, just by clicking here. Cool, right? Now, for more features like this, go to podhome.fm and create your account to get started.